everybody. I'd like to call to order our regular meeting of the James City County Planning Commission. It is April 3rd, 2024 at 6 p.m. Ms. Lystanis, will you call the roll, please?
Yes. Dr. Allman.
Present.
Dr. Allman represents the Roberts District. Mr. May.
Here.
Mr. May represents the Powhatan District. Mr. Everson.
Here.
Mr. Everson represents the Stonehouse District. Mr. Rogers.
Here.
Mr. Rogers represents the Berkeley District. Mr. Haldeman.
Here.
Mr. Haldeman is an at-large member. Mr. Polster.
Here.
Mr. Polster represents the Jamestown District. Mr. O'Connor.
Present.
Mr. O'Connor is an at-large member and is chair of the commission. For the record, Mr. May is participating remotely due to a medical condition. I'm Susan Lystanis, Director of Planning for the county, and it's my pleasure to serve as Secretary to the Commission. Sitting to my left is Ms. Liz Parman, Deputy County Attorney. Mr. Chairman, we have a quorum.
Thank you very much. First item on our agenda this evening is public comment. This is time reserved to address the Commission on matters not under consideration in a public hearing. Is there anybody that wishes to address the Commission? Hearing none, we will move on from the public comment and turn to reports of the Commission. Mr. Rogers, Development Review.
Thank you. Mr. O'Connor, these are the minutes of the April 3, 2024 DRC meeting. Due to a lack of a quorum on Wednesday, March 27th, the DRC was unable to take action for a new business item at their scheduled meeting. A special DRC meeting was then called by the Planning Commission Chair in accordance with the Planning Commission's bylaws, and that meeting took place today, Wednesday, April 3rd at 5:30 p.m. The new business item was a request from the Parks and Recreation Department to construct an outdoor fitness court at the Warhill Sports Complex in an area directly adjacent to the existing basketball courts and a parking lot previously identified on the master plan for the development of athletic courts and parking. Additionally, the applicant also proposes future additions of several recreational amenities. These include a skate park, a 50-meter outdoor pool, and pickleball courts. They asked the DRC to find that these additional amenities, as well as the outdoor fitness court, are consistent with the adopted master plan. The members of the DRC had a brief discussion about the parks master plan and the proposed recreational amenities. And then I, Steve Rogers, made a motion to find the proposals consistent with the master plan, and the DRC recommended approval to the Planning Commission. Motion was passed by a vote of 3-0.
Any questions for Mr. Rogers? Thank you, Mr. Rogers. There was no policy committee meeting this month, so we have no report there. Item E on our agenda this evening is the consent agenda. On the agenda tonight are the minutes of the March 6, 2024 regular meeting, minutes of the March 18th, 2024 organizational meeting, and SP-240012 Warhill Sports Complex, which was the report that Mr. Rogers just gave for the DRC. These are items that are normally non-controversial and open for discussion. Understanding that, Mr. Haldeman, you want to pull the site plan 24-0012 from the consent agenda?
Yes, please.
So I'll entertain a motion for our new consent agenda, which is the minutes of March 6th and the minutes of March 18th.
So moved.
So all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. May. So having pulled that, I will ask for a presentation on site plan 24-0012. Is that what you'd like?
I don't have a presentation. I don't have any problems with it, and I don't have any questions of staff. I just wanted to make a comment that I've made just about every time a Parks and Rec application comes up, and that is the paucity of recreational facilities in the southeast part of the county. And I know that that the Parks and Rec Department is trying to correct that. There's been an attempt to buy more property, and it's been approved, or we ranked it very highly last year on the CIP. But the fact is, the Parks and Rec Master Plan has a map that shows a very heavy concentration of parks and recreational facilities from here up, and almost nothing in the southeast. The Fink Center is the sole recreational facility, and it's not open on weekends, and it's not open on evenings, and it doesn't come close. There's no swimming pool, the only part of the county. And I just would like the minutes to show that I wish we could find a way to get moving on servicing this part, just out of a feeling of fairness. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Haldeman. Any other questions, comments?
Well, I guess we'll find out with the budget coming up whether or not it's going to get funded and when. And right now, that's kind of a mystery. So, you know, attending the budget meetings that are going to be held next week is something that probably ought to do.
I think I would just add, I appreciate Mr. Haldeman's comments. This affects my district disproportionately, and I think given that it's a key goal priority in the comprehensive plan to achieve more geographical equity in terms of the distribution of parks and recreation, I think it's always worth bringing up when we're having a conversation about parks and rec development.
Thank you. Not seeing any other comments. I'll entertain a motion to approve SP-24-0012 Warhill Sports Complex Fitness Court Amendment and Master Plan Consistency.
So moved.
So we have a motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Tonight's first public hearing is SUP-24-0001 7146 Little Creek Road rental of rooms. Ms. Costello, good evening.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good evening to the Commission. Ms. Anna Martinez and Mr. Kenneth Fletcher have applied for a special use permit to allow for the short-term rental of one bedroom in a four-bedroom single-family home at 7146 Little Creek Dam Road. The property is zoned A1 General Agricultural designated rural lands on the Comprehensive Plan land use map and is located outside the primary service area. The property is served by private well and septic. If granted, this SUP would allow for short-term rentals throughout the year. No changes to the footprint of the home are proposed. Staff finds some favorable factors for this application, such as the presence of adequate off-street parking and that the owner will live on site. Staff finds the proposed use will not negatively impact levels of service for roads and other public services. While staff believes the location is generally considered appropriate for this use, staff finds that the proposal is not fully consistent with the adopted 2045 Comprehensive Plan recommendations for short-term rentals. Therefore, staff is unable to recommend approval of this application. After the packet was published, staff did receive a comment from a citizen that resides in the Little Creek subdivision. Copies of the email were provided, and then we also put a copy at the dais. Should the Planning Commission recommend approval of this application, staff has included proposed conditions for consideration. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have, and the applicant is also available. Thank you.
Any questions for Ms. Costello? Mr. Everson?
What is the definition of a, I don't know, what is the word? Major or local road?
It's a classification that VDOT has.
So Little Creek Dam Road is considered local by VDOT?
It's considered a local road.
And the road, if you call it a road, that goes into where this house is located, what would that be considered?
That's a shared driveway.
It's
It does have
driveway.
it has access to Little Creek, but because of the subdivision, it's a minor subdivision, it has a shared driveway. So there's one driveway that serves the lots on that road, and then it has access to Little Creek Road. So the address is Little Creek Road.
Yeah, because I went out yeah, I went out and looked at it. I drove right by it. So, for the comprehensive plan purposes, the fact that it's not on a major road and not on a, I guess, a corner, I guess you're looking, there was two of these things, it's not located on a major road, and it's internal to, quote, the subdivision, rather than, I gather, on the corner lot.
We don't look at it as this lot is internal because it does have access to Little Creek, and we've always interpreted that it's on Little Creek. Typically, we wouldn't want to see short-term rentals internal to a neighborhood so that they have to cross streets or go by other properties to get to it.
So you would have a different position if this was the lot that's directly on Little Creek.
Well, all of those lots have access to Little Creek from the shared driveway, so we would consider them all the same.
But the second condition said be located on the edge or corner of an existing platted subdivision rather than internal to it. So it passes that test because it's got a Little Creek Dam Road address?
It's technically off of Little Creek Road. It has a stem. It's a
Right.
25-foot stem, so it's technically attached to Little Creek, so it's on the outskirts of, you don't have to pass, it's not internal to a subdivision. It's off a shared driveway, but we've interpreted it as it being off the main road.
So the only part of the comprehensive plan that this doesn't comply with is that it's on a local road rather than
On
a
a
major
local
road.
road, yes.
So of the 4 conditions, it meets 3. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much. At this time, I will open the public hearing, and I think we have so far one speaker card, Kenneth Fletcher.
Good evening, Planning Commission. My name is Kenneth Fletcher. I'm the owner of the lot, along together with my wife, Anna Martinez. First, I'd like to thank the Planning Commission for their careful consideration of our. My wife, Anna, and I and our 2 young children moved to our home in Atlanta last December. You can see it up, just pull it up on the screen. This was just after construction was completed sometime in November that a drone shot was taken, so you can get a sense of how it stands. Anna would have loved to be here tonight, but we couldn't get a babysitter for 2 young kids. You know, we're in a new construction home in a rural area on 4 acres. We're surrounded by forest on all sides. We feel very lucky to live here. We've really moved out here in part because we believe James City County is a wonderful place to raise a family and to stay here for many years after house and move. Young kids is not easy. You know, we also really it out where we live. You know, this gives you a sense of where we are in the small subdivision where homes are under construction. We're applying to occasionally rent out a guest room in our home. Our home is hundreds of feet from our nearest neighbor. There's only one house that has been completed, which there are 3 other under construction currently. We have one house that is complete. We know that neighbor well. Because he's present. We've spoken with him about our plans. He has no issues. I'm not sure where the comment came in, but obviously we would work with any of our future neighbors on any concerns that they may have. I'll show you just kind of, this is a photo I took yesterday morning. We have this guest room kind of next to our garage on the side of the home. It's mainly designed because my family lives out of state. But they come frequently and visit from Maryland. My wife's family lives out of the area. We have friends who come from out of the area. So when we were designing the house, we wanted a place where we could have friends and family stay when they come to visit. You know, we also hope to rent out the room occasionally. So, you know, we like to meet new people. We enjoy using Airbnb when we travel. And obviously we'd appreciate earning some extra income, but I have no intention of having people at our house with our 2 young kids constantly. You know, it's 1 or 2 weekends a month. It might work out, and we have to kind of feel out and see what works best for our family. You know, these points give you just kind of a top level points of what we're thinking. There will be somebody at home during the day. I work from home full time, so I'm at home, you know, 8 to 5 every day, and then usually it's getting the kids ready for bed after that. My wife's a stay-at-home mother. We only will rent this bedroom to a maximum of 2 people. Like I said, we're not going to plan to have it fully occupied. And, you know, I'll say, well, the extra income from a short-term rental is nice. We're not dependent on it. It's not like we bought this as an investment property where we need short-term rental income to make our mortgage payments or earn income. This is really something we're doing for a little bit of extra income, and like I said, to get to meet people. You know, one thing that I'll say is that my priority is always going to be the well-being and comfort of my family. We also value building good relationships with our neighbors, really like the quiet atmosphere. So my focus is really going to be on building that community. And obviously, if any neighbors had concerns, we would work with them. If anything, you know, impinged on that safety and well-being of my family, we'd be sure to scale it back or address any issues that occur as they arise. If approved, we plan to get a business license, update our certificate of occupancy as needed, and meet any and all other requirements. And I thank the Commission for its consideration of this special use permit. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Any questions of Mr. Fletcher?
Yes, Mr. Chair, this is Scott Maid, Powhatan District. That shared driveway to access the property,
Yes.
I'm assuming that's a private driveway, not a state-maintained driveway?
No, it's not state maintained. We once everybody moves in, we're planning on having a road maintenance agreement for that shared driveway, but no, it's not state maintained.
Okay, thank you.
So, Mr. Fletcher, just one question. I don't know. Do you own up to the reservoir, or how far is that buffer, and are you granted access to the reservoir from your lot?
Super News Waterworks owns a buffer. It's, you know, maybe 250, 300 feet, depending on where from our property you go out to the reservoir. They have made their position clear, you know, when we put this application in, that they would not like any of our guests to access the reservoir, any short-term rental guests, which we're fine with. I mean, you know, we don't need any problems with Newport News. From what I understand, as an adjacent resident landowner, we are granted limited access, you know, if we want to go back there and fish on the reservoir or something, but not for.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Fletcher. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I do.
Oh, Mr. Everson,
Yeah.
go ahead.
To follow up on that, you said the Newport News Waterworks doesn't want your guests to be going over to the reservoir. Did I hear that right?
They sent a comment letter or email that made that point.
How do you ensure that? Because I got to tell you, if I was there looking at the whole, I went out. In fact, I parked in front of your house the other day. I was taking a look at it. You know, and given this email we got, if I was staying there with my wife, I think I'd want to walk down the road and look at the reservoir and go through the woods and that sort of thing after coming back from Colonial Williamsburg or Busch Gardens or something like that. How do you go about enforcing the fact that you have guests who are allowed to go out there and look? Because I'd sure want to go out there through the woods and look.
That's a fair question. You know, I'd say a couple of things on that. First, what Newport News suggested is to make clear that Little Creek Reservoir Park, which is a 2-minute drive up the road there, you can see it on the map, has access. It's got a very nice trail that you can walk along the reservoir. It's got a pier for fishing. It's got a boat ramp. So I let people know as part of the conditions, you know, if they accept a rental there, there's no access to the reservoir. That's where they have to go if they would like. The other thing I'll just add is that, like I said, I'm work from home. I've got a window where you can look out on the driveway and back on the woods there. The same from our living room. So if we see people walking back there, you know, we'll let them know that that area is off limits. We have 4 acres. We do have some trails on our own property we've built through the woods. So if they want to take a walk, they're welcome to do that on our own property.
I have one additional quick question. How frequently are these special use permits renewed? Do you know when you would have to reapply?
My understanding, if I remember correctly, is that in 2 years, there's a reconsideration of the permit. So we would have to reapply close to the end of 2025. I think that's the
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Fletcher.
Thank you very much.
Any other comments regarding this public hearing? Seeing and hearing none, I will close the public hearing and open it up for discussion. Mr. Bolster.
I have a question for staff. Ms. Costello? I thought I understood the difference between a tourist home and a short-term rental. But I never knew that the pieces in the comp plan that apply to Airbnb and short-term rentals also applies to rental of rooms. Is that right?
Short-term rentals is any rental less than 30 days. And then we have two types of short-term rentals. We have one where they can rent out the whole house up to 5 bedrooms, and that's a tourist home, or they can rent out a room, which we've interpreted to be rental of rooms.
Okay, so it's the 30-day piece
Yes.
that's there. So if it was a longer piece, it wouldn't come underneath that. And then the last question to follow on what Ms. Altman asked is, isn't there an SUP condition that the board every 5 years reconsiders, not 2?
No, the condition that's in there now is put in all of the short-term rentals, is that they have to notify us by November 2025, and then they're all going back to the board February of 2026. Just to check to make sure there's no issues, have we had any complaints? But typically there's no sunset clauses in the short-term rentals where they have to come back so many years.
As opposed to the Airbnbs where there was that 5-year? I'm just trying to make sure I understand the differences.
I'm
for
not
the
sure
conditions.
what the 5 years is that you're referring to.
I can remember seeing conditions that said within 5 years, or it was a specified time, they had to come back. And so I guess that's why I'm trying to understand that, and maybe I had it wrong.
I think in the beginning when we started doing them, because I know I had one in 2018, we did have them come back, in 2 years because they were fairly new. But I think typically the county attorney, they don't encourage sunset clauses, so we try not to have them in there. So most of the short-term rentals that have come before you have this compliance clause in there, but we have not put in conditions previously to have them come back in any 3 to 5 year time.
So just for my own edification then all of the short-term rentals that we've approved are going to come back to the board in 25?
Yes.
All of them?
The ones that have had this condition.
Okay, I got you. Thank you.
Any other comments, discussion?
I'll make a motion that we recommend approval to the board for SUP 24-0001 7146 Little Creek Road rental of rooms.
I offer a possible amendment to that.
Sure.
So I typically am opposed to the short-term rentals, and in this case, knowing that Newport News Waterworks has asked for a condition not to allow guests or tenants, if Mr. Fletcher's amenable, that be added as a condition to allow his guests or tenants access to the reservoir, or to disallow that.
Sir, step up and please tell us if you'd allow that.
Yes, I'd be happy to accept that condition. I mean, from my perspective, that's their property, and they can put any condition on access that they want. So I would respect their wishes on that.
So I'd like to take that amendment to it.
Before we do that, Mr. May, did you have any other questions?
No, sir.
So, thank you. So,
Okay,
all right.
with that condition added.
So we have a motion to approve
I'm sorry, I want to make sure that Terry understood that. Okay.
with an amended condition for that guests not be permitted to access Little Creek Reservoir. So Ms. Istanis, the roll, please.
Sure. Mr. Haldeman?
Aye.
Mr. Polster?
Aye.
Mr. Rogers? Aye. Dr. Allman? Mr. Everson? Mr. May?
No.
Mr. O'Connor?
No.
4-3, motion passes.
Thank you very much. So our next public hearing tonight, Master Plan -24-0001 / zoning -24-0004, Ford's Colony Master Plan and Proffer Amendment. So, Ms. Olaf, good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission. Ms. Susan Tarley of Tarley Robinson PLC has applied on behalf of the Ford's Colony Homeowners Association, FCHOA, to amend the adopted Ford's Colony Master Plan and Proffers. The amendment is in reference to the use of 6.76 acres of land located at 125 Firestone. The subject property is located inside the primary service area. It's zoned R4 residential planned community and is designated low-density residential on the 2045 comprehensive plan. The proffers and master plan for the Ford's Colony development have been amended several times since the subdivision's inception in the mid-1980s. Most recently, this body has reviewed amendment requests pertaining to the Ford's Village Continuing Care Retirement Community, and prior to that, for a general cleanup and revisiting of outstanding proffers, many of which were deemed satisfied or no longer applicable as the community is very near build-out after nearly 40 years of growth. Similarly, the current proposal deals with a proffer from one of the earliest of such proffer amendments. The current request would change the master plan designation of 6.76 acres from a public service area for dedication to the county to a similar non-residential service use designation serving the HOA instead. The 6.76 acres was proffered for dedication in 1987. Given factors such as changing RPA delineations, community build-out, and the selection of other sites around the county for the originally imagined public uses at 125 Firestone, and also based on feedback received from other reviewing agencies, staff finds the proposed recategorization more appropriate in scale and applicability to the site. Staff finds this proposal compatible with the surrounding zoning and development and generally consistent with the 2045 comprehensive plan as well as the zoning ordinance, and recommends that the Planning Commission recommend approval of the amended proffers and master plan to the Board of Supervisors. Thank you for your time. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have, and a representative from FCHOA is also in attendance and willing to answer your questions as well.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Olaf? Mr. Alderman?
The yellow cross hatching, that's the 15 plus acres, and the green is the 6 3/4.
The green actually, I think, is more of an optical illusion. I think that's a BMP or some water feature.
Okay.
The 6.76 acres was never specified. It was just some 6.76 acres anywhere on this whole property.
And you're very comfortable with the idea that the county has no further use for this, no department in the county, fire, police, any have completely.
We have not received any feedback indicating interest in it. And the original proffer states that for the FCHOA basically had to give it to the county within 90 days of the county wanting it. And that was back in 1987. So that hasn't been pursued since 1987, and none of the reviewing agencies have indicated interest either.
And finally, the easement will preclude the construction of any buildings for all time. Is that correct?
That is not necessarily true. I might be confused about the easement you're referencing. The original proffers spoke about an easement in there. There's a lot of RPA that would make it very difficult.
Okay, I'll rephrase it. This is going to be transferred into, I think they said, Section J, and for their own they're going to turn it into their own amenities. Could they change their mind at some later date and start building houses in there?
No, they would have to come back before this body and amend their master plan of
That's my
proffers again.
question.
Yes.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much. This time I will open the public hearing and invite any comments. Mr. Mulhare, good evening.
Chairman, members of the Planning Commission, it's my pleasure to be here before you again. This evening, I am standing in for Ms. Tarley this evening. I'm speaking on behalf of the FCHOA, the Fords Colony Homeowners Association's Board of Directors. We're grateful for staff's work and concur with staff's recommendations. The Fords Colony developer made a proffer over 35 years ago to provide a small piece of land for a potential public service need. This need did not materialize at this location. The Homeowners Association acquired a larger parcel that included this proffered piece in a tax foreclosure in late 2022. And the association agrees to a designation that would not permit residential development. The designation of non-residential service or amenity is consistent with the Fords Colony Master Plan. Be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Mulhare? Thank you very much. Anybody else wishing to speak on this application? Seeing and hearing none, I will close the public hearing. And prior to opening it up for discussions, I will ask if there are any disclosures. I had a brief discussion with Ms. Tarley yesterday afternoon.
As did I.
As did I. This is Scott May.
So, thank you, Mr. May. So, and from that, I'll just open it up the floor for discussion.
I have one question here. Are we still doing this kind of proper arrangement? Because I know that the Stonehouse community, which was approved in 1990, had proffered a school site. Then when they went to build Stonehouse Elementary, they discovered that the site was all ravines and it was impractical. And here, I suppose, I don't know what they're going to put, a police station or fire station. Now it's considered not needed. Are we still doing this kind of stuff, setting aside public lands inside these developments? Because they seem, unless I'm mistaken, they just seem to never develop into a public use. Or am I missing something here?
I can't recall a specific proffer that does this. I'm sure there are some, but we do still accept proffers, and that this is a potential.
I don't have a problem with it. In fact, if you want, I'll move approval. But it's surprised that we have these public lands proffered out and then we don't want them.
In the case of Stonehouse, we took the money and ran. It was $800,000. And for the land at the Colonial Heritage, we said no to the police, not the police, the fire piece. So, I mean, those are decisions that the board makes.
Yeah.
I mean, there's nothing special about it.
Oh,
No, I think like in the Fords Colony's case and some of these other communities that have been developing for so long, other events take over. And, with, I think it's Station 2, is that the one, 5 that serves nearby? So it's just didn't serve the need for, for the fire department at the time. And, we often see in some of these cases, just from my own personal professional experience, that, developers will make certain proffers that then become the responsibility of the homeowners association, and they don't make sense, or they're not practical any further. So this is just some of the cleanup, I think, if you will, that we've seen in Fords Colony over the years as they've come in to amend their master plan, either for uses or for traffic studies or things along those lines. So, any other comments? I'll entertain a motion.
This is Scott May. I would just say that sounds like this property was set aside back in 1987 for potential future development, but now that Fords Colony is right at about max build out that they've determined that it's not needed anymore. So I would support this application.
Thank you, Mr. May. So, Mr. Everson?
I'll move approval.
So we have a motion to approve Master Plan 24-001 and zoning -24-0004, Ford's Colony Master Plan and Proffer Amendment. Ms. Istanis?
Mr. Haldeman?
Aye.
Mr. Polster?
Aye.
Mr. Rogers? Dr. Allman? Mr. Everson?
Aye.
Mr. May?
Aye.
Mr. O'Connor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you very much. Our final public hearing this evening, SUP-23-0030, St. Olaf Catholic Church Campus Expansion. Ms. Lynch, before you start, I just want to share with the rest of the Planning Commission that I got the blessing from Ms. Parman. I did a conflicts check. I am a parishioner at St. Olaf's and part of the building committee that we have there that's putting this application forth. So I certainly don't own a church and don't stand to have any personal gain in this. So Ms. Parman said that she doesn't see that I have a conflict, and I think I can judge this application fairly unless anybody objects to my participation.
Absolutely not.
No objection here.
I did talk to Mr. Rinaldi about this yesterday, I think it was.
Okay. Any other disclosures?
I did too.
Mr. May, any disclosures?
No, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. So I spoke to Mr. Rinaldi yesterday as well. So Ms. Lynch, I'll give it to you now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the Commission. Mr. Jason Grimes of AES has submitted a request to amend a special use permit, SUP 0007-2015, to allow for an additional 25,000 square foot expansion to the existing St. Olaf Church campus, including but not limited to space for outreach ministry programs, administration, counseling areas, religious education, multi-purpose space, and an expanded parish hall, as well as additional parking areas. The subject property is located at 104 Norge Lane, zoned R8, rural residential, and A1, general agriculture, classified as low-density residential on the 2045 comprehensive plan, and is located inside the primary service area. This SUP shall replace and supersede SUP 0007-2015 and its conditions. However, several proposed conditions have been carried forward, including lighting, which states that any new lighting shall meet the previous lighting condition to match current fixtures and pole height. Staff finds that this proposal is compatible with surrounding zoning and development and is generally consistent with the 2045 Comprehensive Plan and Zoning Ordinance. Staff also finds that the proposed conditions will mitigate impacts to surrounding properties and development. Staff recommends that the Planning Commission recommend approval of this application to the Board of Supervisors, subject to the proposed conditions. After the conditions were submitted, staff was informed that contrary to the note on the master plan indicating the removal of the playground, it may in fact not be removed. The master plan will be edited, as will the condition addressing the playground to reflect this. After the packet was published, staff did receive a comment from a citizen that owns property across the train tracks. Copies of the email are provided for your review this evening. I am happy to answer any questions you may have. The applicant, Jason Grimes, is not here tonight, but another AES representative, Graham Corson, is available to answer questions as well.
Tess, do you have a slide that shows, you mentioned a condition change. Do you have a slide that shows, just for the Planning Commission to understand? Yep. Okay. So if you look at this slide, you can see the revised proposed condition number 7 that Tess spoke about with the change in status of the playground, strikes out the word shall and incorporates may.
Any questions for Ms. Lynch? Mr. Rogers?
I'm just looking for a little clarification maybe, where on the staff report, there's places in the project's description where it says, for instance, Land Bay 2 proposes renovations to and/or demolition of buildings B or C. I mean, that, for me, that's hard to understand the and/or piece. Are the buildings being torn down? Are they being pushed? And actually, before you answer that, because this is tied to it, a sentence in the paragraph above it says that the parish hall is deemed to be too small. And I'm just wondering what the deeming process is, if you can capture that for me.
Sure. So in the application materials, that was where the applicants use that language of they deemed it too small. As far as the maybe torn down, maybe expanded, as far as I'm aware, there are no definitive plans for what is going to be done. And the applicant's proxy can provide a bit more information perhaps, but they wanted to address any of the possibilities that they might do.
All right, so we're being asked to vote for the scoop to nuts, basically. All right, thank you.
Isn't it true that in Land Bay 2, there's an existing building there?
Yes.
Was.
Pardon?
Was.
So there's nothing existing there now?
So,
House there, isn't it?
where it
house is
says
there.
Land Bay 2, there had been a house there, but it was no longer usable. So rather than allow it to fall into disrepair, the church had it taken down.
I'm just puzzled about the demolished piece that was in that condition. I thought there was something that they were thinking about either taking out or putting in or leaving. And I was just trying to figure out what would they leave as opposed to what would they demolish? Or is that?
I'll let the applicant
Okay.
speak to it when we get there.
Okay.
So-
Ms. Lynch can't answer that, but the applicant can?
When you come in the entrance there's a building right to the right when you come in the entrance to St. Olaf's. My understanding from talking to somebody out there who I don't know what her name is, that building was going to be torn down. And that's what I thought this was referring to.
I thought it was too.
I'm trying to keep my distance, so we'll let if Ms. Lynch
Okay,
doesn't have the
fair
answer,
enough,
we'll let the
fair enough.
applicant take
Got
that answer. So any other questions on the staff report?
Just to zero in, because I think we're going at the same thing a little bit. I go to mass there occasionally, so I should disclose that too to everybody. I'm a St. Bedian, but at times. But when you drive in towards the church, I feel like there's a small parking lot with a building right to my right. Is that the building that we're not talking about, or?
I think that's a question for
The applicant,
The applicant.
not for the staff.
Not for staff.
That's why I
Thank you,
asked the
staff.
question. Okay, so.
Any other questions? Thank you, Ms. Lynch. Appreciate it. So I will go ahead and open up the public hearing.
Am I going
and-
to hear something from the applicant?
What's that?
The question for
We
the
usually
applicant?
do that with the public hearing.
Okay,
I'm getting there.
okay. I'm just,
You're only 1 month removed from chairman.
I'm just trying to figure out what's going on here. They got up to stand up to answer the question. Sorry, sir. Excuse me.
It's all good.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, good evening. My name is Graham Corson. I'm an engineer and project manager for AES. I'm standing in for Jason Grimes, who is unable to attend this evening, and I'm pleased to be representing St. Olaf Catholic Church tonight. I would like the commissioners to know that Father Tom Mattingly, pastor of St. Olaf, and several members of the church building committee are here tonight, and together with myself are available to answer any questions you may have. Father Tom has prepared some brief remarks that we would like to give to the commissioners and the clerk for record. The work on the request before you this evening began 2 years ago when the church met with planning and stormwater staff to discuss the church's objectives and process for achieving them. We have worked closely with staff since that time and are very pleased with the staff report summary, conclusions, and the staff recommendation for approval. Given the favorable report and recommendation, that concludes our introductory remarks. We are happy to answer any questions you may have.
I may.
Please, Mr. Ronaldo.
I'm Mark Rinaldi, 4029 Ironbound Road. The question about, can you put back the master plan? And do I have the ability to point to it with this pointer? Oh, yes, I do. No, yeah. I do down a few pages, but yours was a better image. From Miss Lynch's, thank you. Excellent. Okay. So the question about and or, there was, ooh, this is very sensitive. There was, hands up. Okay, sorry. There was a residential structure here. The church purchased this property a few years ago, and there was a residential structure here, and it was in poor shape, and so it was demolished. We started this process, as we said, 2 years ago, and I don't believe it was demolished when we started the process. So some of the language is perhaps remnant from that. So there was a home here, and it is now gone. The church's administrative offices are located right here at the present time, and it is also outdated, inefficient, not adequate to serve the needs of the parish administrative staff. Eventually, that will also be demolished, and this is the building that will provide the support that we need for both the classroom space, educational space, counseling space, multipurpose room, and parish administrative staff. So, and then up here, this was the original church here. It now serves as our sort of fellowship hall or parish hall. And when I think there was a question about deemed too small, I don't have an exact number, but it supports, well, we had Stations of the Cross recently, and we were told maybe 60 or 80 people could comfortably sit in there. So someday, the church is anticipating building a larger space that would allow for larger events such as weddings, maybe even funeral receptions, things such as that, and that would be in this place here. We don't know whether we would demolish this and start anew or whether we could get more life out of that. Probably going to be a combination of the two. Squeeze more life out of that, and then eventually down the road build the parish hall. So that was the and or part of our application. Was that helpful?
Yeah, I think we both probably read it differently, that the current administration building could be demolished because we already knew about the house that was gone.
And it will be eventually. This building, this shows a building right here that could eventually be another.
Right. And so what we were trying to do is figure out for Land Bay 2, which building it was that you were going to demolish, knowing that the house is gone already.
Okay.
And so the condition that's there is if in 36 months you don't do something, then you have to come back again?
Correct.
Okay.
And it is our intention to move swiftly. If the Board of Supervisors grants approval, we are going to move swiftly with site plan and building drawings for this facility right here. We're many years overdue for that.
I mean, I had to really kind of look at what you had there because it was unsure about what you were going to build, but what you came in with was an SUP that took care of all the eventualities. And after I started going through the land bays and your drawings and figured it out, then I became more comfortable. But the demolishing of the building was still a question in my mind. Thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant?
Yeah. Well, go ahead, Steve.
I lost my piece of paper. What I think it'd be a question for the applicant. You said you're from AES?
Yes.
So an engineer?
Yes, I am.
Because I'm not an engineer, and that'll be obvious probably when I try to phrase my question, but there was the one email that came in that was expressing concern for the SUP talked about, let me see if I'm understanding it correctly. I thought it was implying that if you made these changes, stormwater was going to collect on their property. Is there any way just to discuss that? Are you aware of that concern?
Yes,
or can you talk
we
to it?
were made aware of the email as well. And the email is concerning, if you're looking at this display here, there's the existing wet pond B&P, which is located on the western, I guess, northern portion of the site. It's on the left side of the plan here, and it outfalls to the neighboring property. As part of any changes that would occur to the site, we will be required to attenuate any flows that come from the site from any additional impervious areas. So anything we do will actually improve the drainage situation. Right now, the majority of the property actually does drain to that wet pond and then goes across there and into the Skimino Creek eventually. And we don't plan on increasing the drainage to that B&P as far as area goes, but impervious area may increase. We also have the opportunity to maybe take some of the stormwater runoff and take it towards Richmond Road, which would then go to the Yarmouth Creek Reservoir. So anything we do would have to be approved by the county. We would have to meet DEQ and James City County regulations, and that would include not increasing any flow out off the site.
That's it. So, but what I was looking at when of course, to me, world is flat with the image. It looked to me like everything you were proposing was towards Richmond Road, and that's why I was trying to figure out which way the displaced water was going to go. But does the entire property tilt towards the B&P?
Not the entire property. There are portions along the Richmond Road right-of-way that do drain towards Richmond Road currently, but it's a small sliver. If you see the kind of thick dashed line, that represents the drainage area to the existing wet pond. So that gives you an idea of the majority of the site already goes to that wet pond and is treated by that wet pond. And if we increase, as part of this, if we increase impervious area, it will increase the runoff to the B&P. But that's why we have the possible area for B&P expansion on that side. So if we do increase the runoff to the B&P, we would increase the size of the B&P in order to make it not have as much flow off the site.
I was going to ask about the same thing. So by expanding this, then what his gentleman is writing about, he won't have to worry.
No, correct. We will be required to mitigate the flow to attenuate to pre-development or better levels.
As long as he doesn't have to worry, we're happy. I'm happy.
Any other questions for the applicant? Thank you very much. I have one speaker card on this application. Steve Martin.
Steve Martin, 3301 Derby Lane. I own the property across the railroad track with the little pond on it. And I wrote the email. That land drains into Skimino Creek. About half of the original property of the church drained into Yarmouth Creek, okay? And so what's happened with prior developments, they built up the western part of the parking lot, and they drained it back to the railroad track, and it goes through a 12-inch pipe underneath the railroad track and goes into the pond. There's no drainage system over there. It just goes through a grass swale. And so that's the way it is now. The corner at Norge Lane, I guess it's Land Bay 2, presently drains into Yarmouth to the west. And the development of that is what I'm concerned about, because the additional waters that will come from that, while they might be treated for water quality and attenuation of certain flows like we had with Floyd, and some of the bigger flows are going to, will overtop probably and come back down through my pond, and there's not capacity to do that. The easiest way to avoid that would be to let the drainage patterns stay in the same direction that they're in now, which would be to Richmond Road. I just heard Graham mention that they might do that, and that would be fine with me. That would solve my problems. So that's the only comment I had.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. Appreciate it. Anybody else wish to speak on this application? Seeing and hearing none, I will close the public hearing and open it up for discussion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we recommend approval for SUP 23-0030, 100 Norge Lane, St. Olaf Catholic Church campus expansion with attached conditions.
Thank you, Mr. Haldeman. Ms. Istanis?
Could I just ask for clarification, please? So we did put up on the screen the change to the condition, that kind of after the fact. Would your motion include that
Sure,
change?
I thought that was included. I'm
Okay,
sorry.
thank
yeah.
you.
Yes. Mhm.
Mr. Haldeman?
Aye.
Mr. Polster?
Aye.
Mr. Rogers? Dr. Ullman? Mr. Everson? Mr. May?
Aye.
Mr. O'Connor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for coming out tonight. It's the biggest crowd we've had in a while, so.
Sell tickets.
What's that?
Sell tickets.
So item G on our agenda this evening under Planning Commission considerations is the Diascund Watershed Management Plan update. Mr. Wilson, good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. Welcome to the commission, Dr. Allman, Mr. Everson, Mr. May. I am Mike Wilson, Section Chief, Stormwater Resource Protection Division. Tonight before you is a discussion of, or a presentation for the Diascund Creek Watershed Management Plan. For those that aren't aware, the county has undergone watershed management plans for the various watersheds within the county. Recently, we updated the Powhatan and the Yarmouth plans in 2023, and we are in the process of developing a plan for Diascund Creek. We are currently in the 30-day public comment period, and our intention is to go to the Board of Supervisors at their May board meeting. Tonight with us is Daniel Proctor and Coleman Goad from Stantec to do the presentation. Gentlemen.
Our presentation is very similar to the other two within the past year. We'll go over the watershed assessment that was completed as part of the plan, as well as key findings, and example recommendations from that plan. Highlight the public engagement and the public comment period that's currently open, and open it up for any questions. The watershed assessment, like with the others, contained 3 parts. There was a review of past information from other studies and other monitoring data that was available. There was a field level assessment where we reviewed the stream channels and the watershed conditions with our own staff, and then the desktop level analyses as far as water quality, potential flood risks, impervious cover changes, and land conservation potential. I'll go through each of those, share some of the key findings. As far as the monitoring data, we wanted to point out there has been monitoring over the years, but it's very, very limited. So although the Department of Environmental Quality has included the watershed as impaired for bacteria as part of the broader Chickahominy River watershed, the monitoring within Diascund Creek is relatively limited. As far as impervious cover trends, we didn't have a past watershed plan that included prior years, like with some of the other plans from 20 years ago. But we did look at current conditions and potential future full build out based on current zoning and comp plan conditions. Currently, all of the sub-watersheds based on the impervious cover model used is sensitive, which is the highest quality. And then looking at future full build out, all of the watershed except for one sub-watershed still stays within that sensitive category, and that one just moves up to the next zone of impacted. And as far as conservation area review, this watershed, being where it's located within the county, has a lot of great potential for land conservation. It's highly undeveloped currently, and based on the review of the cultural and natural assets plan that the county has already completed, There were, I think, around 16 areas that we reviewed that had great potential for potential land conservation considerations. For the water quality modeling, I wanted to point out that most of the watershed has not experienced much development. There is some anticipation of increased pollution coming from development along the Route 60 and Route 30 corridors, but it's significantly less of a water quality concern than some of the other watersheds within the county. You'll see with these maps, the dark green is the best, like kind of the best water quality conditions. Light green is slightly less, and then yellow and red would be a decline. The color scheme on these maps, if you're comparing them to some of the other watersheds, I did want to point out, have been changed. So if we use the same color scheme like we did for Yarmouth in existing and future conditions, all of the watershed would be dark green, except for one sub-watershed, 102, that you see red here would be light green. So we actually changed the color scheme to be able to better understand a comparison, a relative comparison across sub-watersheds. But overall, in comparison to other watersheds within the county, significantly less water quality concerns. Our field assessments concurred with that. 91% of the stream channels that were reviewed during our field walk, which covered about 35 miles of streams, 91% of those were in good conditions, either optimal or suboptimal based on the rating scheme used. And only 9% were in that third category down as marginal, and none of them were rated as poor. As far as our flood risk review, we looked at both existing and future conditions from tidal flooding, as well as the FEMA floodplain. There are currently 21 structures within the floodplain, 2 critical infrastructure facilities, both with the Diascund Creek Reservoir. And then as far as future conditions, a very small amount of additional homes were identified. And then probably most notably, with the reservoir within the watershed, there were about 126, possibly more buildings within the dam break inundation zone of that reservoir. So one of the recommendations on the flood risk side is further coordination with Newport News Waterworks, just to make sure that that dam is following appropriate regulations and procedures. So the main takeaways, overall the watershed is in great health. There is a potential for adverse effects due to future development in the upper portions of the watershed if not mitigated. But overall, the conditions are very healthy. The types of recommendations included in the plan follow some of the similar templates from before. They've included regulatory/enforcement recommendations, mainly focused on the special stormwater criteria and helping to mitigate the potential for upstream development, to have tightened regulations versus just baseline conditions. There's programmatic recommendations as far as increasing land conservation potential, septic system improvements, et cetera. We also included some more targeted stormwater treatment practices within specific spots where isolated concerns were identified. And then likewise across the county, there's a lot of opportunities for further public engagement and education on the environmental conditions of where they live. And then last, on the floodplain management, I mentioned a recommendation for increased communication with Newport News Waterworks, as well as other similar. With our public engagement, we had a public website established at the onset of the watershed plan development. There's a mapping tool that's still available on that public website that you can access via the link shown here. There was also a public survey that was active for a while. It's closed in October of last year, and the public was able to get on a list for announcements and about what the happenings with the watershed plan development. We had 2 public meetings. The first was very well attended back in August of last year on feedback from the watershed assessment. And then we had one just recently, the second one on a feedback on some of the recommendations. And then currently, as Mr. Wilson mentioned, the draft plan is on the website currently. It was posted March 18th, and it's open for a 30-day public comment. We encourage everyone to review and any other interested parties to review and provide comments on the website. We have received some comments to date that included a variety of comments on the assumptions used in the modeling, the impervious cover assumptions, some of the, grab my notes, and as well as some comments on the flood risk assessment, extending that further upstream, and then concerns about the development in the upper portions of the watershed, amongst other comments. And those will all be reviewed and evaluated as we finalize the plan following the close of the public comment period. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Alderman?
Would you please go back to key findings? The 2 maps there that. Thank you. On future conditions, there's a little yellow area labeled upper mainstream. Yellow meaning it degraded. It will be degraded over time. And then another one, lower mainstream, lower main stem, excuse me. And in between is pretty good stuff. And I was just wondering how it gets degraded upstream and degraded downstream in the area, and the middle remains in pretty good condition. Are there specific sources upstream and downstream that get diluted in between, or how does that work?
We've looked at all the properties within each of the subwatersheds and what they're currently zoned, and modeled with these maps here what the potential pollutant loading might be if they were built out to what the zoning and comp plan might allow. So in some of those subwatersheds that you'll see the change in color scheme is where future development would be anticipated. That would result in that condition changing.
What I thought you were going to say, but I was just curious. Thank you.
So are we, I'm sorry, just as a follow-on, so when we talk about sources of bacterial loading, so is that, in your modeling, is that residential versus agricultural uses, or, so septic systems is what we're talking about?
Correct, all of the above. So it includes residential, a lot of pet waste potential with residential areas, as well as septic systems and potential for failure of those systems in agricultural lands as well. So all of those sources using some industry guidance was incorporated.
Frank?
First off is thank you very much for doing this, because we haven't done the Diascund and we now have a benchmark. And just like we've gone through the Powhatan for a second time and the Yarmouth for a second time, dramatic changes that have occurred. But we now at least have a benchmark for the Diascund. One of the things that struck me that was very different about this study was not the impervious surface cover. But when you take a look at your water quality modeling, could you bring up the nitrogen and the phosphorus and the sediment once, please? And this gets to your point about why the lower end ends up. And because stuff goes downhill, right?
This is the nitrogen here.
Right. And so you can see the impacts on the streams in yellow in the DC 101 area, and all of that flows down on the nitrogen. And you can see that a lot of this is coming out of what essentially is the Hazelwood and down to 60 for it. And then, of course, the 103 is the Anderson Corner piece with the farming pieces on that. And then the next one, and you can see the same thing that happens now with the, is this the phosphorus? Yeah, this is the phosphorus. And so even though their watershed, their BMP piece showed that it looked good, the fact of the matter is the number of subdevelopments that are in this area weren't required to have BMPs. And so there's no attenuation of the phosphorus, the nitrogen, and the sediment for it. And as you would expect, it ends up in the lower end of the watershed. And so the thing that I asked them about was, okay, you know, what do we do about that except we have a benchmark? Well, one of the things that I remember seeing is that they've got a series of recommendations for additional stormwater facilities, swales and things like that within existing areas, subdivisions that they've earmarked there. And so if there is going to be any kind of mitigation to the existing conditions, there needs to be an increase in the attenuation of all this coming down, because it's not going to, it's just going to continue to develop, even without development, right? It's just going to get worse for it. The sediment one shows the same thing, doesn't it? Yeah. And so what was least disappointing or disheartening to me was it wasn't the impervious surface cover, but it's the lack of treatment of the nitrogen, phosphorus, and the sediment. And of course, they've got a series of stream restoration projects and different solutions on there that may be the solution, but it'll take money, especially with neighborhoods that don't have HOAs, which is really the issue there for it. I guess the last thing I wanted to shift to, Danny, and we talked about this a little bit, was that this is the third watershed master plan that you had. And it seems to me that you've had some pretty consistent recommendations across the three for that. Can you kind of highlight what you think those items are that apply across all of the watersheds?
Yes, there's definitely some consistent recommendations, and from some of the more developed watersheds, you can see some of the concerns more pronounced of where there's an opportunity to get out ahead of future development, require above and beyond controls to limit that downstream effect. There's also consistent recommendations to better understand flood concerns and being able to plan for climate change as far as future flood conditions. Is there anything you'd want to add?
I'd say the programmatic items are pretty consistent across the board, and just the general recommendation of retrofit of existing BMPs that have been around for a long time that, according to our field assessments, some are not in as great of shape as we would have liked. So that's, while Diascund Creek watershed specifically doesn't have a whole lot to work from there, we're still working with all of, existing BMPs to look at those, and then also adding new BMPs where there aren't any, so.
I think the good news is that in terms of the regulations and ordinances, I know that the staff is looking at updating the special stormwater criteria, as well as the new DEQ guidance that takes care of some of the downstream, and so hopefully we can do that. But I think the thing that really catches me the most is on the programmatic side, is when you add up the recommendations that you have in each of these, it's almost impossible to be able to find the money for that. And so I wish there was a way as you go through this thing is I know that you have a strategy piece for each of them, but it seems to me that we really need a strategy piece across these three to figure out how we'd go about. Now I know that's work that goes on later on, but it's just unbelievable the amount of money that you've forecasted within these three watershed master plans it would take to mitigate some of these. And so at some point, I guess there's a notion of where should the priorities be? Should they be in the areas which we know that are pretty good, like the Diascund, so that we don't want it to get worse? Or is there some kind of a strategy that may help us?
And, I would like to point out, we tried to lay out a lot of options, realizing that they wouldn't all be implemented, and they wouldn't all need to be implemented per se. It was more of an opportunity for the county to then prioritize those choices moving ahead.
That's fair. That's fair. Thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. May, any questions?
No, Mr. Chair.
I just wanted to ask one question, going back to the floodplain management piece. We talked about ongoing dialogue with Newport News Waterworks. I mean, is the county considered a stakeholder, and do we participate in their emergency planning sessions and those types of things, or?
Yes, sir. Mr. Wilson would be able to definitely explain that better, I'm sure.
Excellent question. And the answer is yes. Through our emergency management team, Sarah Rue and the fire department, they hold exercises regularly with all the big ones, if you will, Surrey, Newport News, FEMA. Yes, we are a stakeholder, and we will. I haven't gotten to it yet. I had a minor medical issue come up last week, but Newport News will be getting a copy of this report specifically for their comments, as will our service authority.
Thanks, appreciate it. You got Mr. Wilson, any other questions? And I'd be remiss not to recognize Ms. Small sitting in the back of the classroom there. So she heads up our stormwater efforts for the entire county. So welcome tonight. So anything else? Thank you very much. Appreciate it. So we are on to Planning Director's Report. Ms. Istanis.
Yes, thank you. Within your packet, you've received the monthly case report. In terms of board action, Z230010, the Luckstone Toano Proffer Amendment, that was approved by the Board of Supervisors, 5-0. And then a couple staffing notes. In Building Safety and Permits, Jamie Miner was promoted to Plans Examiner 1. And from Planning, you may or may not know already, but Susie, also known as Suzanne Yates, has accepted a new position outside of the county, so you will no longer be seeing her. Yes, we're sad to see her go, but it was something that really helped, I guess, forward her career goals in planning, so we wish her well. We are currently working to hire 2 new planners. So we've got advertisements out for that. And then we did just hire a second administrative coordinator, Will Albiston, who is in the audience, and it's his first Planning Commission meeting. So we're happy to have him, and Amanda, of course, you know. So we've got a full complement of administrative coordinators. So thank you very much.
Any questions? So thank you very much. So we will move on to Planning Commission discussion and requests. And if I could grab the floor real quick before we open it up to everybody else. Thank you to everybody who responded. I will get an email out to everybody, but for the DRC, I would like to appoint Steve Rogers as the chairman once again to continue on. Scott May, Frank Polster, who offered to do double duty, and myself. And then on Policy Committee, Mr. Haldeman has agreed to continue to chair. So I'd like to have Jack Haldeman, Frank Polster, Dr. Allman, and Jay Everson on Policy Committee. So trying to get us rounded out a little bit. I was a little surprised when Beth circulated the last piece. You know, I thought I had 2 years to go, but I'm down to about 8 months. So, you know, I don't know that I'll seek reappointment. So I'm looking forward to getting everybody involved and up to speed this year. So, and then I will also circulate the schedule for the Board of Supervisors. I assigned myself April as by chance there are no public hearings for April, so I'm off the hook.
You rap.
Good job.
So there are no land use public hearings for April, so we'll start the schedule with May. So I'll get that out for everybody. So
You have some upcoming Planning Commission and DRC meetings this month? Thank you.
So, open it up to everybody else. So, seeing and hearing none, I will move on from PC discussions and requests and ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So all in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.
Aye.
Thank you very much.